Dad, I'm not hungry, Naomi whispered, even as her stomach let out a quiet, hollow growl that filled the silence of the small kitchen, the kind of sound a parent never forgets. Marcus Carter stood there for a second longer than usual, keys still in his hand, watching his 9-year-old daughter slide her untouched lunchbox onto the counter like it didn't matter, like food was just something optional, something she could walk away from without consequence. The late afternoon light stretched through the window, catching the faint tremble in her fingers as she pushed the box forward. And something about that tremble didn't sit right. Not today, not anymore. This wasn't the first time. It had been days now, maybe longer, of half-eaten meals, quiet excuses, and that same small smile she gave him every time he asked if she was okay. The kind of smile that tried too hard to look normal. You sure? Marcus asked, keeping his voice low, steady, like he didn't already know the answer. Naomi nodded quickly. Too quickly, her braids shifting slightly as she avoided his eyes. We had a snack at school, she added, her voice soft, careful, like she had rehearsed it. Marcus glanced down at the lunchbox, still sealed, the plastic latch untouched. No crumbs, no fingerprints, nothing to prove it had even been opened. The air felt heavier than it should, thick with something unsaid, something just out of reach. Naomi stepped past him, her small shoulder brushing against his arm, and for a second he felt how light she was, lighter than last week, lighter than she should be. She walked toward her room without another word, socks whispering against the hardwood floor, and closed the door gently behind her, not slammed, not angry, just quiet, too quiet. Marcus stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the lunchbox like it might explain itself if he waited long enough. The clock ticked above the stove, each second stretching longer than the last. He moved slowly, almost carefully, and opened the lid. Inside, everything was exactly how he packed it that morning. Turkey sandwich, apple slices, a small bag of pretzels, even the napkin still folded neatly on top. Untouched, perfect, wrong. His chest tightened, because this wasn't about a picky appetite. This was something else, something deeper. He closed the lid softly and leaned against the counter, running a hand over his face, trying to piece it together. Naomi had always been a good kid, quiet, kind, the type who said thank you even when no one reminded her, the type who noticed when others didn't have enough. And maybe that was it. Maybe that was where this started, but he didn't know how far it had gone, or why she was coming home like this every single day. Later that night, he paused outside her door, the faint sound of movement inside. Maybe pages turning, maybe just her shifting in bed. He raised his hand to knock, then stopped. Something held him back, not fear, not exactly. More like the sense that if he asked the wrong question, he might get the same answer again. That soft, practiced, "I'm not hungry." And that wouldn't be enough anymore. Not now. Not when his instincts were screaming that something was wrong, really wrong. He lowered his hand slowly, the hallway dim, shadows stretching along the walls, and made a decision he never thought he'd need to make. Not with his own child. The next morning, his hands weren't as steady as usual as he packed her lunch. The same sandwich, the same apple slices, the same pretzels. Routine felt important, like it might keep things from falling apart. Naomi walked in, backpack slung over one shoulder, hair neatly braided, face calm, almost too calm. She smiled at him, small but real enough to hurt. "Morning, Dad," she said, and for a second, just a second, everything felt normal again. He handed her the lunchbox, their fingers brushing, and he noticed the slight chill in her skin. She turned toward the door, sunlight spilling in from outside, bright and indifferent, and Marcus watched her go, his jaw tightening as the door clicked shut behind her. The house fell silent, but his thoughts didn't. They raced, circling the same question over and over. Why? He moved through the house slowly, like he was carrying something fragile inside him. And then he stopped in the hallway, eyes landing on her backpack from the day before, resting against the wall, where she left it. And that's when the idea came, not out of suspicion, not out of control, but out of something deeper, something heavier, the need to understand. Because whatever Naomi wasn't telling him, it was bigger than skipped meals, bigger than simple hunger, and he couldn't just stand there and hope it fixed itself. Not anymore. Not when his daughter was coming home every day pretending she didn't need to eat, pretending everything was fine. He reached for the bag slowly, like it might hold the answer. Like it might finally tell him what she couldn't say out loud. The zipper made a soft metallic sound as Marcus opened Naomi's backpack, slower than necessary. Like he was crossing a line he could not uncross. The fabric still held the faint warmth of her morning walk, sunlight, movement, normal life. And yet his hands felt heavy, deliberate. He reached inside and paused, fingers brushing against notebooks, a pencil case. The ordinary things of a child's day, nothing about it looked wrong. Nothing about it explained why his daughter was coming home hungry. He exhaled quietly and pulled the items out one by one, placing them on the kitchen table in neat rows. As if order might reveal something, chaos was hiding. The house remained silent except for the distant hum of the refrigerator and the ticking clock that now felt louder than before. He found the lunchbox tucked neatly at the bottom, still sealed, just like yesterday and the day before, untouched. Again, his jaw tightened, but he did not open it this time. Instead, his eyes shifted to the inner lining of the bag, searching, noticing the slight bulge near the seam, something subtle, easy to miss unless you were looking for it. He pressed gently and felt something small, firm, not part of the bag's original shape. His breath slowed. Then he carefully reached into the hidden fold and pulled out a tiny object no bigger than his thumb, a compact camera. Simple, quiet, almost invisible. He stared at it for a moment, the weight of the decision settling in his chest. This was not something he ever imagined doing. Not with Naomi, not with anyone. But the image of her small frame, her quiet voice saying she was not hungry while her body said otherwise, pushed him forward. He turned the device over in his hand, found the small button, and hesitated, just for a second, then pressed it. The screen flickered to life, grainy at first, then clearer, the angle low, inside the backpack, showing glimpses of movement as Naomi walked, the rhythm of her steps, the sway of fabric, the muffled sounds of a school hallway filling the tiny speaker, lockers closing, distant chatter, shoes against tile, everything ordinary, everything exactly as it should be, until it was not. The footage shifted as the bag was set down, the view tilting slightly upward, capturing the edge of a cafeteria table, fluorescent lights overhead casting a pale glow, voices layered on top of each other, laughter, conversations, the sound of trays sliding. Marcus leaned closer, his eyes narrowing as Naomi's hands entered the frame, small, careful. She unzipped the lunchbox slowly, almost cautiously, like she was aware of being seen even when she was not. She opened it and paused, her fingers resting lightly on the sandwich, and for a moment she did nothing, just sat there, still, the noise around her continuing without her. Then another pair of hands appeared across from her, thinner, hesitant, the sleeves worn, edges frayed. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest as he watched Naomi gently slide the sandwich forward across the table. No words, just that quiet movement. The other hands pulled back at first, uncertain, then reached forward quickly, almost urgently, taking the sandwich like it might disappear if they waited too long. Naomi did not react, did not look surprised. She simply pushed the apple next, then the small bag of pretzels, her movements steady, practiced, like this was not new, like this was routine. Marcus swallowed hard, his grip tightening around the edge of the table as he kept watching. The camera captured Naomi leaning back slightly, her hands now empty, resting in her lap. Her stomach made a faint sound, barely audible under the noise of the room. But it was there, undeniable, and she ignored it completely. Across from her, the other child ate quickly, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes darting around as if expecting someone to take the food away. And still, Naomi said nothing. She just watched, calm, quiet, present, like this was exactly where she wanted to be. Marcus felt the room around him fade, the kitchen, the clock, everything, replaced by that small screen and the truth unfolding inside it. Because this was not someone forcing his daughter. This was not fear, this was something else entirely, something deeper, and as the footage continued, he realized this was only the beginning of a story he did not yet understand. Marcus did not stop the video, not when Naomi pushed the last piece of food across the table, not when the other girl finished eating with quick, careful bites, and not even when the bell rang and the cafeteria erupted into motion again, chairs scraping, voices rising, footsteps echoing across the tile floor. He kept watching, his eyes locked on the small screen, as Naomi quietly packed the empty lunchbox back into her bag, her movements calm, almost routine, like this was just another part of her day, something as normal as math class or walking home. She stood up, slung the backpack over her shoulder, and walked away without a word, leaving the other girl behind, who sat there for a moment longer, staring at the empty wrapper like it meant something more than just food. Marcus leaned back slightly, his breath shallow, his mind racing through what he had just seen. This was not bullying. This was not pressure. This was choice. Deliberate, repeated, and that realization settled heavy in his chest, because it meant Naomi had been doing this every day, choosing hunger for herself so someone else would not have to feel it. The footage shifted again as the camera captured the rhythm of her steps through the hallway, the muffled sounds of lockers and distant laughter filling the background. Everything looked normal on the surface, just another school day. But now Marcus saw it differently. Every step she took felt heavier. Every second carried more weight than it should for a child her age. He rubbed his hand across his face, trying to steady himself, but something deeper pulled at him, a question that refused to stay quiet. Why that girl? Why this? Why every single day? The video continued, and soon the final bell rang. The sound sharp and sudden, cutting through the noise like a signal. Students poured out of classrooms, voices overlapping, energy shifting as the day ended. Naomi moved with the crowd at first, blending in, her small frame almost disappearing among the taller kids. But then, instead of heading toward the buses like most of them, she turned, subtle, easy to miss if you were not paying attention, and walked in the opposite direction. Marcus leaned forward again, his eyes narrowing as he watched her leave the main path. The hallway grew quieter, the sounds fading as she reached a side exit. The door opened with a soft push, sunlight flooding the frame for a brief second before the camera adjusted. Outside, the world looked different, wider, quieter, the hum of distant traffic replacing the noise of the school. Naomi stepped onto the sidewalk and began walking, not toward home, not toward the bus stop, but down a side street Marcus did not recognize. His chest tightened as he watched, counting the steps in his head without realizing it. One block, then another. The pavement cracked in places, weeds pushing through the edges, houses growing smaller, more worn, the paint faded, windows covered with thin curtains that barely moved. Naomi kept walking, her pace steady, like she knew exactly where she was going. Like this path was familiar, practiced. Marcus felt something shift. Inside him, a quiet unease building into something sharper, something harder to ignore. This was not just about lunch anymore. This was something else entirely. The camera captured her turning once more, down a narrow stretch of sidewalk where the streetlights looked older, dimmer, the kind that flickered at night. And then she stopped, right in front of a small house that looked like it had been forgotten, the yard uneven, the steps slightly worn. She stood there for a second, adjusting her backpack, her shoulders rising and falling with a small breath. Then she reached out and knocked, twice, soft but certain, and Marcus felt his heart drop into a silence that was louder than anything he had heard. All day the door did not open right away, and for a second Naomi just stood there, her small hand still hovering near the wood, as if she was listening for something on the other side. The street behind her quiet except for the distant hum of a passing car and the soft rustle of leaves moving in a light breeze. Marcus leaned closer to the screen, his breath slowing, his eyes fixed on every detail, the peeling paint on the door, the faint crack running down the frame, the kind of place you would not notice unless you had a reason to stop. Naomi knocked again, just as softly as before, and this time there was movement, subtle at first, then clearer. The door opened just a few inches, not wide, just enough for a face to appear in the narrow gap. The same girl from the cafeteria, her hair slightly tangled, her expression cautious, like she was used to checking before trusting. She looked at Naomi, and something in her shoulders relaxed almost instantly, the tension easing just enough to let the door open a little more. Not fully, never fully. Naomi did not step inside right away. Instead, she slipped off her backpack slowly, carefully, like she did not want to startle anything. Her movements deliberate, practiced. Marcus felt his chest tighten as he watched her unzip the bag and reach inside, pulling out a small bundle wrapped in a napkin. Something extra, something that had not been in the lunchbox, something she must have hidden before leaving the house. She held it out, without a word, and the girl reached for it. Her hands still hesitant, but quicker now. Like she was learning to trust the routine, Naomi stepped inside just a little, not fully crossing the threshold, just enough to be closer. And for a moment the camera caught a glimpse beyond the doorway, the interior dim, shadows stretching across a small space that looked more empty than it should, a single chair near the wall, a table with nothing on it. No movement, no voices, just stillness, the kind of stillness that felt too heavy for a place meant to be lived in. Marcus swallowed hard, his grip tightening on the edge of the table. Something about that silence unsettled him more than anything he had seen so far. Naomi spoke then, her voice soft, barely audible through the small speaker, but enough to carry a few words, gentle, steady. "It is okay. I brought more today." The girl nodded, her eyes dropping to the food, her shoulders curling slightly as she held it close, like it mattered more than anything else in that moment. Naomi did not rush, did not push. She simply stayed there, present, calm, like she had nowhere else to be. Like this moment was the most important part of her day, Marcus felt. Something shift inside him, something heavier than confusion, something closer to understanding, but not complete, not yet, because this was more than just sharing food. This was something deeper, something that had been building long before he ever noticed the empty lunchboxes. The camera captured Naomi reaching back into her bag one more time, pulling out a small plastic bottle of water, placing it gently into the girl's hands. And the way the girl looked at it, like it was something rare, something valuable, made Marcus's chest tighten again, because water was not something a child should have to see that way. Not here, not anywhere. Naomi stepped back slowly, giving the girl space, her movements quiet, respectful, like she understood boundaries without needing to be told. And then, after a few seconds, she gave a small nod, a silent goodbye, and turned away, the door closing softly behind her. Leaving the house, just as still as before, Marcus sat there, unmoving, staring at the screen as Naomi walked back down the cracked sidewalk, her steps steady, her posture unchanged, like she had not just given away everything she had again. Like this was normal, like this was her choice, and for the first time, Marcus realized that whatever his daughter had been carrying, it was far heavier than hunger. And he had only just begun to see it. Marcus did not realize how long he had been sitting there until the screen went dark. The video, ending with Naomi's footsteps fading into the distance. The kitchen felt different now, quieter in a way that pressed against his chest, like the walls themselves had shifted. He leaned back slowly, his hand still resting near the small camera as if it might start playing again on its own. But it did not. It just sat there, silent, holding more truth than he was ready for. He ran a hand over his face, exhaling through his nose, trying to steady the weight building inside him. Because this was no longer a question of why she was not eating. That part was clear now, painfully clear. The real question was how long. How long had she been doing this? How many days had she walked into that house? How many times had she chosen someone else's hunger over her own? And why had he not seen it sooner? The clock ticked louder again, each second marking something he could not take back. He stood up abruptly, the chair scraping lightly against the floor, and paced once across the kitchen, then again, his mind replaying the footage in fragments. Naomi's small hands, the way she slid the food forward without hesitation, the way she stood at that door like it belonged in her routine, like it mattered more than going home, more than anything else. He stopped near the counter and looked down at the lunchbox still sitting there from earlier, untouched, perfect, wrong. Again, he opened it this time, slowly, as if the contents might change if he gave them enough time. But they did not. The sandwich still whole, the apple slices still fresh, the pretzels still sealed, everything exactly the way he packed it. And suddenly it felt heavier than it should, like it carried something beyond food, something tied to choices he did not understand. He closed it again, more firmly this time, and set it aside, his jaw tightening as a new thought pushed its way forward. If Naomi was bringing extra food, then it was not just from school, it was from here, from his kitchen, which meant she had been planning this, quietly, carefully, every single morning while he stood just a few feet away. Unaware, he moved quickly now, opening the pantry, scanning the shelves. Something felt off, not empty, but not quite right either. Small things missing in ways that were easy to overlook. A box of granola bars lighter than it should be, A jar of peanut butter used faster than usual, nothing obvious, nothing alarming on its own, but together, it formed a pattern, a quiet one, hidden in plain sight. Just like everything else Naomi had been doing, Marcus leaned against the counter again. The realization settling deeper. She had not just been giving away her lunch, she had been preparing for it, planning for it, making sure she had something more to offer, something enough. His chest tightened at that word. Enough, because it meant she knew the other girl needed more than just one meal. It meant this was ongoing, consistent, something she had taken responsibility for without ever saying a word. He closed his eyes for a brief moment. The image of that small, dim house returning, the silence inside it, the empty table, the way the girl had held the food like it mattered more than anything else in the world. Marcus opened his eyes again, sharper now, more focused, because confusion was giving way to something else, something steadier, something that felt like a decision forming. He could not sit here and just watch this unfold through a screen. He could not let Naomi carry something this heavy alone. Not anymore. He turned back toward the camera, picking it up again, his grip firm this time. No hesitation left, because whatever this situation was, however deep it went, he needed to see all of it, understand all of it, and more importantly, step into it, not as someone watching from a distance, but as a father who had finally realized that his daughter had been protecting someone else at the cost of herself, and that was not something he could ignore any longer. Marcus did not wait until the next day. That was the first thing that changed. The routine broke the moment understanding settled in his chest, because routine had allowed this to happen unnoticed, and he could not let that continue. The house felt too still as evening approached, the light outside fading into a soft orange glow that stretched across the kitchen floor. Naomi's footsteps eventually returned. Just like always, quiet, steady, the door opening, with the same gentle push, the same small smile waiting behind it. "I am home," she said, placing her backpack down in the same spot, like nothing had changed, like everything was still normal. Marcus watched her closely this time, not just seeing her, but really seeing her, the slight dip in her shoulders, the way her movements were just a little slower than they should be, the way her eyes avoided the counter where the untouched lunchbox sat. He nodded once, keeping his voice even. "Hey kiddo," he replied. But there was something different beneath the calm, something Naomi seemed to feel immediately, because she paused for just a second longer than usual, her fingers brushing against the strap of her backpack, as if she was deciding something. Then she moved again, heading toward her room, the same quiet path, the same soft footsteps. But Marcus did not let the moment pass this time. "Naomi," he said gently, not loud, not sharp, just enough to stop her. She turned slowly, her face calm but her eyes searching his. Waiting, measuring, he stepped closer, not too fast, not too slow, and crouched slightly so he was at her level. The space between them filled with something unspoken, something fragile. "Did you eat lunch today?" he asked, the question simple, but heavier now than it had ever been before. Naomi hesitated, just a fraction, then nodded. "Yes," she said softly. The same answer, the same practiced tone, but Marcus did not look away this time. He held her gaze, steady, patient, and for a moment neither of them moved. The clock ticked somewhere behind them, marking the silence. Naomi's fingers tightened slightly around the fabric of her shirt, and Marcus saw it. That small detail, that crack in the surface. He exhaled slowly, choosing his next words carefully. "What did you eat?" he asked, his voice still calm, still gentle. Naomi's eyes flickered, just for a second. Then she looked down, her voice quieter now. "The sandwich," she said, and the words hung there, thin, fragile. Marcus nodded once, not calling it out. Not yet. He stood back up slowly, giving her space. Because this was not about catching her in something. This was about reaching her. About understanding why she felt she had to carry this alone. "Okay," he said simply. And for a moment Naomi looked confused, like she expected more, like she expected him to press harder, but he did not. Instead he turned toward the kitchen, opening the fridge, the soft hum filling the space again. "I am making dinner early today," he added, his tone light, but deliberate. "You can help me." Naomi hesitated, then nodded slowly, stepping closer, her movements cautious, uncertain, like she was walking into something she did not fully understand. Marcus handed her a small bowl, their fingers brushing again. And this time he did not miss how light her hand felt. He did not miss the way she held the bowl, just a little tighter than necessary. As if grounding herself, they stood side by side in the kitchen, the sound of running water, the clink of utensils, simple things, normal things. But beneath it all, Marcus's mind was still moving, still piecing everything together. He needed to approach this carefully, not with confrontation, but with truth, the kind that would let Naomi feel safe enough to share what she had been hiding. Because now he knew this was not just about food, it was about something deeper, something she believed in enough to go hungry for. And that belief mattered. It mattered more than he had realized. He glanced at her briefly as she rinsed the vegetables, her face focused, calm again, like she had slipped back into her routine. But Marcus could see it now, the weight she carried beneath that calm. And he knew one thing for certain. Whatever Naomi had been protecting, whatever she had been giving up for someone else, he was not going to let her do it alone anymore, not after what he had seen, not after what he now understood was only the beginning. The kitchen filled with the soft rhythm of small, ordinary sounds, the kind that usually meant everything was fine, water running over vegetables, the quiet scrape of a knife against a cutting board, the low hum of the refrigerator. But tonight those sounds felt different, like they were covering something just beneath the surface, something waiting to be said. Marcus moved carefully, not rushing, not forcing the moment, just letting it settle, letting Naomi stay beside him, letting the silence stretch without breaking it too soon. She stood on her toes slightly to reach the counter, rinsing the lettuce with steady hands, her focus fixed on the task like it mattered more than anything else, like staying busy might keep everything else from spilling out. Marcus watched her for a moment, then reached into the cabinet and pulled down 2 plates, setting them gently on the counter, the soft clink echoing in the quiet space. "You have been helping someone," he said finally, his voice calm, not accusing, just steady. Naomi froze, not dramatically, not suddenly, just a slight pause, a stillness that replaced her movement, her hands resting in the water, the faucet still running. She did not turn right away. And for a second Marcus wondered if she would pretend not to hear him. But then she slowly shut off the water, the silence returning. Heavier now, she dried her hands on a towel, her movements slower than before, more careful, like each second gave her more time to decide what to say. She turned toward him, her eyes lifting just enough to meet his. And in that look there was something new, not fear, not exactly, but awareness, the understanding that something had changed, that he knew more than he should. "I saw the video," Marcus added quietly, and the words settled between them like something fragile but undeniable. Naomi's fingers tightened slightly around the edge of the towel, her shoulders rising just a fraction before falling again. And for a moment she said nothing, the clock ticking louder again, marking the space where her answer should be. Marcus did not move closer, did not push. He just stayed there, giving her room, giving her time. Because this was her truth to share, not something he could take from her. Naomi's voice, when it came, was soft, almost a whisper. "She is hungry," she said, simple, direct, like that explained everything. Marcus felt his chest tighten again, but he nodded, not interrupting, not correcting. Naomi swallowed lightly, her eyes dropping for a second before lifting again. "She does not have lunch," she continued, her words careful, chosen. "Sometimes, she does not have dinner either." The last part came quieter, like it was something she did not usually say out loud. Marcus leaned slightly against the counter, grounding himself, because hearing it from her made it real in a way the video had not. "So you give her yours," he said, and Naomi nodded once, small but certain. "Every day?" Marcus asked, and she hesitated, just for a second, then nodded again, this time slower, more deliberate. "She needs it," she added, her voice steady now, stronger in that quiet way that did not need to be loud to be firm. Marcus exhaled slowly, running a hand over his chin, processing, understanding, and yet still feeling the weight of it. "Naomi," he said gently, "you cannot just stop eating." His tone was not sharp, not angry, just concerned, grounded. Naomi looked at him then, really looked at him, her eyes clear, steady, and there was something in them that made Marcus pause, something older than her years, something that carried more than he expected. "If I eat," she said softly, "she does not." and the words landed in the space between them with a quiet finality. Not dramatic, not loud, just true. Marcus felt something shift deep inside his chest, something he could not argue with, not because it made sense, but because it came from a place that was pure, undeniable. Naomi looked down at her hands again, her fingers lightly tracing the edge of the counter. She waits for me, she added, even softer now. After school, she waits. Marcus closed his eyes for a brief moment, the image from the video returning, the door, the silence. The way the girl had opened it just enough, and he understood now, not everything, but enough to know that this was not a simple situation. This was something Naomi had stepped into on her own, something she had chosen, not out of obligation, but out of something deeper, something instinctive. He opened his eyes again, looking at her not just as his daughter, but as someone who had made a decision he had not even known existed, and for the first time, he realized that whatever came next, it was not about stopping her, it was about standing beside her, because what she had done, what she was still doing, was something he could not ignore, and more importantly, something he could not let her carry alone anymore. Marcus did not answer her right away, not because he did not have words, but because none of them felt right. The kitchen seemed smaller somehow, like the truth Naomi had just spoken had taken up all the space. He rested his hands on the counter, grounding himself in something solid while his mind caught up. Naomi stood there quietly, not defensive, not afraid, just steady, like she had already made peace with her choice long before he ever discovered it. The light above the stove cast a soft glow across her face, highlighting the calm in her expression, the kind of calm that did not come from comfort, but from certainty. Marcus exhaled slowly and reached for the plate, placing a portion of food onto it, then another, his movements deliberate, careful. "We are both going to eat," he said, not as a command, but as something firm, something that did not invite refusal. Naomi looked at the plate, then back at him, her eyes searching, weighing, and for a moment it seemed like she might argue, like she might say no again, but she did not. Instead she nodded, once, slowly, and stepped closer, sitting at the table across from him, the chair legs scraping softly against the floor. Marcus sat down as well, the distance between them filled with something quieter now, not tension, not quite, but something shifting, something opening. Naomi picked up her fork, hesitating just a second before taking a bite, small, careful, like her body needed to remember how to accept food for herself. Marcus watched her, not staring, not making it uncomfortable, just present, making sure she knew he was there, that she did not have to hide this part anymore. The room settled into a different rhythm, the sound of forks against plates replacing the earlier silence. And for the first time in days, Naomi was eating at the table without pretending, without excuses, without pushing the plate away. But even in that moment, Marcus could see it, the way her eyes drifted slightly, the way her thoughts were somewhere else, not fully here, not fully at ease. He knew where they were, back at that house, at that door, at the girl who waited. He set his fork down gently and leaned back slightly. "What is her name?" he asked, his voice calm, curious, not pressing. Naomi paused, her fork hovering midair for a second before lowering slowly. She swallowed, then answered, "Lily." The name came out soft, almost protective, like saying it out loud made it more real. Marcus nodded, letting it settle. "How long has Lily been alone after school?" he asked next. Naomi's fingers tightened slightly around the fork, her eyes dropping to her plate. "A while," she said quietly, not specific, not exact, just enough. Marcus understood the hesitation, the way she was trying to explain, something that did not have easy words. "Does anyone else know?" he asked, and Naomi shook her head almost immediately. "No," she replied, a little firmer this time. "They do not see her." That sentence lingered in the air longer than the others, heavier, because it was not just about being unnoticed. It was about being invisible in a way that should not happen, not to a child. Marcus felt that weight settle deeper, the kind that does not go away once you recognize it. He leaned forward, slightly, his voice softer now. "You do not have to do this alone," he said, and Naomi looked up at him, really looked this time, her eyes searching his face, trying to understand what he meant, trying to decide if it was safe to believe him. Marcus held her gaze, steady, open. "We will figure this out together," he added, and for the first time, something shifted in Naomi's expression, just a little, not a full smile, not relief exactly, but something close, something that had not been there before, like a small part of the weight she had been carrying had just been set down. Even if only for a moment, she nodded slowly, her shoulders lowering just slightly. And Marcus knew then that this was the turning point, not the end of the problem, not the solution, but the moment where she was no longer facing it by herself. And that mattered more than anything he could have said earlier, because now, whatever came next, whatever they would find behind that quiet door at the end of that cracked sidewalk, they would face it together, not as separate lives intersecting by accident, but as a father and daughter finally standing on the same side of the truth. The next morning felt different before it even began, the kind of quiet that carried intention instead of routine. Marcus was already in the kitchen when Naomi walked in, the sunlight still soft, stretching across the counter where 2 lunchboxes now sat instead of one. Naomi paused in the doorway, her eyes moving from him to the extra bag, then back again, her expression shifting from confusion to something more cautious, more aware. Marcus did not rush to explain. He simply finished sealing the second sandwich, pressing it gently into place before closing the lid, his movements calm, deliberate. "We are bringing enough today," he said, his voice steady, not loud, not dramatic, just clear. Naomi stepped closer, her fingers tightening slightly around the strap of her backpack. "She will not take it if she knows," she said quietly, her words careful, like she had learned the boundaries of this situation over time. Marcus nodded once, acknowledging it. "Then we will not make it about taking," he replied, meeting her eyes. "We will make it about sharing." Naomi studied him for a moment, searching for something in his face, something that told her this would not change what she had been protecting. And slowly, she nodded, not fully convinced, but willing to try. Marcus handed her the second lunchbox, their fingers brushing again, and this time she did not pull away as quickly. They walked out together, the door closing behind them with a soft click. The morning air cool against their skin, the world outside moving. As it always did, cars passing, distant voices, nothing unusual, and yet everything felt different. Marcus drove her to school that day, something he had not done in a while. The car ride quiet but not tense, just filled with thoughts neither of them rushed to say out loud. Naomi looked out the window most of the time, her reflection faint in the glass, her mind clearly somewhere else, already ahead, already thinking about what would happen later. Marcus kept his hands steady on the wheel, his eyes on the road. But his attention was on her, on the way she held herself, on the quiet strength he had only just begun to understand. When they arrived, she reached for the door, then paused, turning slightly toward him. "Do not come inside," she said softly, not as a request, but as something important, something that needed to stay the way it was. Marcus nodded, respecting that boundary without question. "I will be right here after school," he replied, and Naomi gave a small nod before stepping out, the door closing gently behind her. Marcus watched as she walked toward the building, blending into the flow of students, her small figure moving with quiet purpose, and for a moment, everything looked normal again, just another school day. But he knew better now. He knew what happened behind that normal, what choices were being made in silence. He leaned back in his seat, exhaling slowly, the plan forming in his mind not out of control, but out of care. He was not here to take over, not here to disrupt what Naomi had built. He was here to support it, to make sure it did not cost her more than it already had. The hours passed slower than usual, each minute stretching as he waited, the sun climbing higher, then beginning its slow descent, until finally, the last bell would ring, and everything he had seen, everything he had learned, would move from watching into action, because today, for the first time, Marcus was not going to follow from a distance. He was going to be there, not in front, not interrupting, but close enough to step in when it mattered, close enough to make sure that whatever waited behind that quiet door, Naomi would not have to face it alone. Anymore. The final bell rang with a sharp echo that carried beyond the school walls, and Marcus felt it from where he sat parked across the street, his hands resting still on the steering wheel, his eyes fixed on the entrance as students began pouring out in clusters, laughter, voices, movement, all blending into one steady flow. But he was not looking for the crowd. He was looking for one small figure, and when Naomi finally appeared, he saw it immediately, the way she moved, not rushed, not distracted, but focused, her backpack held close, her path already decided before she even stepped off the curb. Marcus waited, giving her space, letting her lead. Just as he had promised himself, she turned the corner. Without hesitation, heading down the same side street he had seen through the camera, her pace steady, familiar, like this route had been walked more times than he could count. Marcus started the car slowly, pulling forward at a distance, careful not to draw attention. The neighborhood shifted again as they moved further from the main road, the houses growing quieter, more worn, the sidewalks uneven, the air still in a way that felt different from the rest of the city. Naomi reached the house and stopped, just like before, adjusting her backpack, taking that small breath. And Marcus parked a short distance away, his heart steady but heavy. He stepped out of the car quietly, closing the door with a soft click, and stayed back, not too close, not yet. He watched as Naomi walked up the steps and knocked twice, the same soft rhythm, and the door opened just a crack, just enough for Lily's face to appear, cautious at first, then softening when she recognized Naomi. Marcus saw it clearly. Now, without the filter of a screen, the way Lily's eyes shifted, the way her shoulders held tension even when she smiled slightly. Naomi reached into her bag and pulled out the food, more than before, enough for two, maybe more, and handed it over in that same quiet, practiced way. No words, just presence. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest as he watched the exchange, because it was not just about hunger, it was about trust, about something fragile being protected in small, repeated moments. Naomi stepped a little closer to the doorway, just enough to speak softly, and Marcus took a few careful steps forward, still outside their line of sight, close enough now to hear, not everything, but enough. "I brought more today," Naomi said gently, and Lily hesitated, her eyes flickering toward the inside of the house before returning to Naomi. "You should eat too," Lily whispered, her voice thin but sincere, and that stopped Marcus for a second, because it meant Lily knew. She understood what Naomi had been doing. Naomi shook her head slightly, a small movement, almost invisible. "We both can," she replied, and for the first time, there was a pause that felt different, not just routine, but something shifting, something opening. Lily looked down at the food, then back at Naomi, and slowly, she stepped back, opening the door just a little wider than before. Not much, but enough to change the moment. Marcus felt that shift immediately, that small change in space, in trust, and he knew this was where everything moved forward, not through force, not through interruption, but through presence. He took one more step closer, his voice calm, steady, not loud. "Hey there," he said gently, and both girls turned, Naomi first, her eyes widening slightly in surprise, not fear, just recognition that this moment had come. Lily froze for a second, her body still, her hands tightening around the food. Marcus raised his hand slightly, not to stop anything, but to show calm, to show he was not there to take anything away. "My name is Marcus," he said, his tone soft, grounded. "I am Naomi's dad." And the silence that followed was not empty. It was full of questions, of uncertainty, of something waiting to be understood. And Marcus knew that whatever came next would not be simple, but it would be real. And for the first time, all three of them were standing in the same moment together, no longer separated by distance, or silence, or hidden truths. Naomi did not speak right away. Her eyes locked on Marcus with a mixture of surprise and something deeper, something closer to worry, not for herself, but for what his presence might change. Lily stood just inside the doorway, her fingers tightening around the food, her body angled slightly back as if ready to retreat at any moment. The space between them felt fragile, like one wrong move could close the door again. Marcus kept his posture relaxed, his hands visible, his voice steady. "It is okay," he said softly, not stepping any closer, not pushing into their space, just holding the moment open. Naomi took a small step forward, placing herself slightly between him and Lily, not in defiance, but in protection, a quiet instinct that did not go unnoticed. "He is not here to take anything," she said gently, her voice calm but firm, and Lily's eyes shifted between them, uncertain, searching for something she could trust. Marcus nodded slowly, respecting Naomi's lead. "She has been helping you," he said, his tone even, not accusing. not questioning, just acknowledging. Lily looked down at the food in her hands, her shoulders rising slightly before settling again, and for a moment it seemed like she might close the door, like she might disappear back into that quiet space. But she did not. She stayed, her voice barely above a whisper. She did not have to, she said, the words simple but carrying. Wait. Naomi shook her head immediately, a small, quick movement. I wanted to, she replied, and there was no hesitation in it, no doubt, just truth. Marcus felt that again, that quiet strength, the kind that did not ask for permission. He took a slow breath, choosing his next words carefully. You should not have to do this alone, he said, not just to Naomi, but to both of them. Lily's eyes flickered again, this time toward the inside of the house, a brief glance, but enough. Marcus noticed it, the hesitation, the unspoken boundary that existed beyond that doorway. Is there someone home? He asked gently, not stepping forward, not crossing that line. Lily hesitated, her fingers tightening around the edge of the door. Then she shook her head, small, almost invisible. No, she said, and the words settled heavier than anything else, not dramatic, not loud, just quiet and final. Marcus nodded once, absorbing it, not reacting too quickly, not letting the weight of it show too much on his face, because this was not the moment for that. This was the moment for trust, for calm. Naomi glanced back at him, her eyes searching, and he gave her a small nod, a silent reassurance that he understood, that he was not here to break what she had built. Lily shifted her weight slightly, stepping back just enough to open the door a little wider again. Not fully, but more than before, the inside still dim, still quiet, but no longer completely closed off. Marcus stayed where he was, not entering, not forcing anything, just letting the moment unfold. Naomi stepped closer to Lily, her voice softer now, almost a whisper. We brought more today, she said, and Lily looked down at the food again, then back at Naomi, then briefly at Marcus, and something in her expression changed, just slightly, not trust fully formed, but the beginning of it, fragile, uncertain. But there, Marcus felt that shift, that small opening, and he knew this was not about solving everything in one moment. This was about being present, about showing that they were not alone anymore, that what Naomi had been carrying could now be shared, not taken away, not controlled, but supported. He remained still, his voice calm when he spoke again. We can help, he said quietly, and the words did not demand anything, did not push forward. They simply existed, offered, waiting, and in the silence that followed, the three of them stood there, on the edge of something new, something uncertain, but also something that felt, for the first time, like it might not have to stay hidden anymore. The air did not move for a moment, not outside, not inside. Like everything was waiting to see what would happen next. Lily stood there with the door slightly open, her fingers still wrapped around the food Naomi had brought, her eyes shifting between them as if she was trying to measure something she had never been given before. Time, maybe, or trust. Naomi stayed where she was, not stepping forward, not stepping back, just present, steady, her small frame holding a quiet kind of strength that did not need to be loud to be seen. Marcus remained still as well, his voice calm when he spoke again, softer now. We are not here to change things all at once, he said, choosing each word carefully. We just want to make sure you do not have to worry about food anymore. Lily's gaze dropped to the ground for a second, then back up again, her shoulders shifting slightly, like the idea itself felt unfamiliar, something she did not quite know how to hold. Naomi took a small step closer, her voice gentle, almost a whisper. You can keep the extra, she said, and this time there was no hesitation in her tone, no question, just certainty. Lily's grip on the food tightened just slightly, her fingers pressing into the paper like she was anchoring herself to it. Marcus watched her carefully, noticing the way her breathing slowed just a little, the way her posture softened, not fully, not yet, but enough to show something was changing, something was being allowed. He glanced briefly past her, just enough to see a little more of the inside. The same stillness, the same quiet, a space that felt paused, like life there had been put on hold, and that told him everything he needed to know without needing more words. He looked back at her, his tone steady. Is there anyone who usually comes home later? He asked, not pushing, just asking. Lily hesitated again, her eyes flickering to the side, then back. Sometimes, she said, her voice small, uncertain, and that word carried more weight than a clear answer ever could. Marcus nodded once, not questioning further, not breaking the fragile line of trust that had just begun to form. Naomi shifted slightly beside him, her hand moving just enough to brush against Lily's sleeve, a small, grounding touch. And Lily did not pull away, she stayed, her shoulders relaxing just a fraction more. Marcus felt that moment settle in, the kind of moment that could easily be missed if you were not paying attention, the kind that changed things quietly instead of all at once. "We can come by again," he said, his voice even, not demanding, not expecting, just offering. Lily looked at him, really looked this time, her eyes searching his face, not for answers, but for something steadier, something she could believe, and after a second, she gave a small nod, barely noticeable, but real. Naomi exhaled softly beside him, a breath she had probably been holding longer than she realized. And in that small release, Marcus understood something clearly. This was not about stepping in and fixing everything in one moment. This was about showing up again and again, the way Naomi had been doing, quietly, consistently, without expecting anything in return. He stepped back slightly, giving them space again, respecting the boundary of that doorway. "We will see you tomorrow," Naomi said gently, and Lily nodded once more, her fingers still holding the food, but her posture different now, less guarded, less alone. The door remained open for a second longer than before, just enough to let that change exist, and then it closed softly, not shut, not hidden, just closed. And as Marcus and Naomi turned to walk back down the uneven sidewalk, the air felt different, not lighter, not easier, but clearer, like something that had been unseen was now finally in the open, and for the first time, it did not feel like a secret anymore. It felt like the beginning of something that could actually change. The walk back felt quieter than before, not because there was nothing to say, but because everything that needed to be understood had already begun to settle between them. Naomi walked beside Marcus with slower steps now, not weighed down the same way, just thoughtful, her eyes tracing the cracks in the sidewalk as the late afternoon light stretched long shadows across their path. Marcus did not rush the silence. He let it exist, let it breathe, because he knew this was not a moment to fill with words. This was a moment to hold. When they reached the car, Naomi paused. Before opening the door, her hand resting on the handle for a second, then she looked up at him, her voice soft but steady. "She is not invisible anymore," she said, and the words carried something deeper than relief, something closer to meaning. Marcus nodded once, understanding more than she had said, because this had never just been about food. It had been about being seen, about someone noticing when no one else did. He opened the door for her, and she climbed in, the familiar space of the car feeling different now, not just a routine ride home, but something that carried the weight of what they had just stepped into together. The drive was quiet again, but not empty. Naomi leaned her head lightly against the window, her eyes half closed, not from exhaustion alone, but from the release of something she had been holding for too long. Marcus kept his hands steady on the wheel, his thoughts moving slower now, more grounded, not racing like before, because he knew what came next would not be solved in a single day. It would take time, patience, presence, the kind Naomi had already been giving without anyone asking her to. When they pulled into the driveway, the sun was lower, casting a warm glow across the front of the house. Naomi stepped out slowly, her movements unhurried, like she was no longer trying to rush through the day. Inside, the house felt the same, but something had shifted, something subtle but real. Marcus moved to the kitchen, setting down his keys, and without a word, he reached into the cabinet and pulled out 2 plates again. Naomi watched him for a second, then stepped closer, this time without hesitation. She reached for the fridge and opened it, her hand moving with quiet certainty as she pulled out the ingredients, the same ones from before. But this time the intention was different. They worked side by side again. The sound of chopping, the running water, the small rhythm of preparing a meal. But now it felt shared in a way it had not been before. Not just a task, but something they were building together. Marcus glanced at her briefly, noticing the difference. The way her shoulders were no longer held as tightly, the way her movements were a little more at ease, and when they finally sat down at the table, Naomi picked up her fork without hesitation, taking a bite. Not small, not careful, just natural. And that simple act carried more meaning than anything else that had happened that day. Marcus watched her for a moment, then looked down at his own plate, taking a bite as well, the quiet between them no longer heavy, just calm, grounded. Naomi chewed slowly, then looked up at him, her voice gentle. "We can bring more. Tomorrow," she said, not as a question, but as a plan. Marcus met her eyes and nodded. "We will," he replied, and there was no doubt in it. No hesitation, just certainty, because this was not about stopping what she had started. It was about standing beside it, supporting it, making sure it did not take more from her than it should. The light from the windows softened as the sun dipped lower, casting a warm glow across the table, across their hands, across the space between them, and in that quiet moment, nothing felt rushed, nothing felt forced. It was just two people sharing a meal, breathing a little easier, knowing that something had changed, not everything, not yet, but enough to matter, enough to begin. Naomi leaned back slightly in her chair, her expression calm, her eyes steady, and Marcus realized then that she had not just helped someone else survive. She had shown him something too, something he had not seen before, something simple but powerful. That kindness, real kindness, did not wait for permission. It did not announce itself. It just showed up, again and again, quietly, until someone finally noticed. And when he looked at her now, he did not just see his daughter, he saw someone who had changed a life without asking for anything in return, and that was something he would never overlook again.